Welcome to Tactical Reviews for a video which is an introduction into what will become a new standard for tactical reviews: work sharp edges for testing. So instead of using the tool that I normally use for bulk knife sharpening, which is a 1-inch belt grinding workshop tool, I'm now going to change to using the Ken Onion edition of the Work Sharp, along with the blade grinding attachment to give me the closest equivalent to that belt grinder. This tool is new to me, as well as going to be the new standard, so let's have a little look at what we get. As I mentioned before, although this in itself is an excellent sharpener, and although I've not used it myself, I've had it demonstrated, or I've used the demo ones, I am going to kind of immediately discard part of it, which would normally be perfectly good, in favour of the more specialised blade grinding attachment. So the standard kit here comes with a number of different belts for the grinder that's on it. So nice instruction guide, and it's the UK version where I'm based. Okay, just pop a few pieces aside, so you don't really need to look at the belts too much. The user guide in different languages, that will be a useful thing, including the fact that the tool has several different options. So in its out of the box configuration, just turn this around. So it has a kind of a transformer built into the power cord, and the unit itself is going to sit on some rubber feet, and has this belt grinder attachment as the Ken Onion standard. So just before it gets put off to one side, it almost does seem a pity, but I'm just going to have a look at the belt grinder that comes with the standard Ken Onion edition, and just look at a couple of ways in the fact that this in itself covers multiple different things. So in its standard configuration out of the box, we have an edge angle guide, a little piece here. I think really the point of this is it's got some rollers on it where, as you draw the knife through, you just prevent that edge from hitting any of the metal parts. So on the back of that angle guide, you've got a wheel, and as you adjust that, if you watch these two, they go in so you can set here 25, widest 30 degrees, all the way back down to 15 for each side of the blade as you draw it through the sharpener. So that angle guide, that will actually, because we're going to convert the head into a grinding attachment, that actually just pops off, and that's it separately. so it still functions off the tool. So let's pop that to one side. Then here we have that little edge guide, and just so that doesn't interfere with what we do, that just pulls forward and twists, and that now sits out of the way of the belt. And then we have a release lever here. Press that and we can rotate the belt forwards. So now we have a grinding tool rather than, you can't put that down on the bench anymore, it's now handheld for sanding. And then just straighten the head back up again for bench use. And then under here we have the power switch with a dial for setting the speed that we're going to run the belt at, and then a locking lever. In fact, you can see the plus minus for the speed adjustment, and then putting the tool on. If we want to go hands-free on the power, it's one of those latching buttons, and off again. So then that's a nice rundown of the standard sharpening head. Pop the guide back on. Now, rather than rotating it forward to become a grinder, to take this off completely, we rotate it backwards, and that now pops off, including the fact that the belt, which runs on this spindle here, is now free. You can see the tensioning spring, and I'm going to pop that aside and bring out the blade grinding adapter. So this is the part that was really interesting me in terms of replacing my full workshop belt grinder with a smaller desktop version. And this is an attachment on its own. This doesn't do anything. You need to fit it to the workshop sharpener. See what we've got in here. So a set of belts, which you can see are, it's a lot bigger than the standard tools belts, and the blade grinding attachment itself. So let's get that fitted to the tool. Now, just before we fit this onto the power tool part, just a few little bits of detail. So this is the mounting part, and this lever here is the angle adjustment, which is geared as we move that. You can see from 10 degrees all the way to 35, which changes this roller position. What it doesn't change is the vertical position. So we have here a backing support for the platen for the belt to run up, and a flat shelf, and the belt tensioner here, which very neatly, as you pull it back, you can twist to lock it, ready for you to put the belt loosely and then release to tension. Let's get it fitted. So we're going to fit on the blade grinding attachment now with a couple of little details just to point out. Now with the standard attachment, it actually locks onto the body of the motor. Now slightly unusually, the blade grinding attachment has no lock, so to speak. Instead we have a locking knob, but this one basically just prevents the belt from popping off, and that is going to be fitted into the spindle. It's actually, if you look at this, it's got a left-hand thread on it, so you don't screw in a normal way. You effectively unscrew to tighten that in place, and that will then sit in place, but it's not actually holding any part of the blade grinding attachment, so it's actually easier to fit that when this isn't in place, because there's no lock on the spindle, so you have to hold it to tighten. So then we have the keying, which we need to line up, and then twist, which has now locked it from coming off but not from rotating, and that is going to come in line with the base as so. So when it sits down, it's the bench that's preventing this from moving. Also of note here, these two rollers, you're going to use this where the belt runs here to position the knife edge, and you can move this roller a little bit closer, making that portion of the belt tighter and flatter if you want. I want to keep it with the full width because I can adjust the pressure that I apply onto the belt and get more or less of a convexed finish on the edge. So on to fitting the belt. I've already fitted the locking nut, which is really a belt retainer. I've pre-compressed the tensioner. Also on the tensioner we have a tracking wheel, so that twists the end of the tensioner left and right to get the belt running cleanly. And in this case I'm using the coarsest of the belts. Quite frequently I prefer a very toothy edge, so I pick a very coarse grade and I go very, very lightly to get the finish that I want. So I was just double checking there that normally on a belt I would expect to see a direction of running, but none of the belts seem to have that, so it's going to assume that Workshop don't care which direction you fit the belt, that way or that way. I'm just going to go with the text in the same direction as on the machine. Keep that as a standard for me. So just fit the belt over that locking knob, because that's where there's a lip, over the two rollers, and then it's sometimes a little bit of a pull to get it over the tensioner, at least the first time. The tensioner then rotates and releases the spring, and that's that belt tensioned and running on the machine. And you would use the tracking adjuster here to make sure that it's running true, and you've got here the angle adjustment, and you can see as you bring the angle finer, the tensioner is compressing. So I can see now with the tension there is a locking knob for the angle, and in fact on those finer angles the belt is pulling it back. If we look at this, I let go and it's going. So if I pick 17.5, my favoured sharpening angle, tighten the locking knob, and you can see here it is rotating around, needs the bench to support it. But now here we have the section that is adjusted by the angle, so the blade comes in flat. We have a vertical grinding surface which you could adjust your own angle and bring it across that. But the idea is that you lay the blade horizontally and bring it onto this section that has the angle you've set. And then time for a quick run. So that was the quick look around the Work Sharp Ken Onion edition with the blade grinding attachment, which is what I'm hoping is going to become the new Tactical Reviews Work Sharp Sharp Standard sharpener. And that's just all the studio view of it, and hopefully I'll find some time to do a little bit of in-use video too. So here I'm going through the initial setup with the aim of sharpening a kitchen knife. So the angle is currently set to 17.5 degrees, which is just to give me a little bit more of a hard wearing edge for the kitchen. I've preset the power to a mid speed, so when I lock it on, as the instructions tell you to for the blade grinding attachment. And then what we have here is a reference pad, so the knife will go onto the reference pad, raise that up and bring it to the sharpening section of the belt. So we should be all ready to go. I'm just going to set the machine on, reference angle for 0, lift and across the belt. That's just a tracking adjustment. And have raised a bar. So just going to do a quick belt change, because I think that was the most coarse belt is a little bit too coarse, I think. So tensioner, take the belt off, replacement belt, and just turn that by hand slightly just before running the machine. Then going to adjust the tracking slightly for this belt, slightly different. And there we go, ready to go. So burr testing torch and the X65 belt. And we try a cutting test. So in this case, this last step that I'm looking at, I want to try and avoid normal stropping. So I'm actually going to put the very finest belt on, but I'm going to go straight from the X65 belt onto the fine belt. Just to see, you know, what kind of result I come up with. And I'm going to compare this one to a strop. So removing this stropping step and just using the ultra fine belt, let's just see whether straight off the machine, this is no stropping. Thanks for joining me, and remember, get informed, be prepared, stay sharp.